How to build mental toughness and strength. There is no doubt that any level of success necessitates mental toughness. Success does not happen by accident. It requires specific and consistently repeated actions over time to produce the desired results. However, taking those actions and achieving those results is easier said than done. This is where mental toughness comes into play. Many people are stymied by a lack of mental toughness. Many people have big dreams and goals, but somewhere along the way, things get difficult and most give up. This is why so many people who begin their path to success fail. They get all excited and motivated to achieve their goals, but then they get stuck. Many people fail to recognize that while talking is simple, doing the work is not. What most people don't realize is that your initial motivation will fade over time, as will the people around you. Then you're alone. But what are you going to do when no one is looking? What will you do if you are struggling and things become difficult? Will you give up? Will you surrender? I don't care how motivated you are, you will reach a point in your journey where you will ask yourself the following questions. Is it worthwhile? What happens if this doesn't work? Perhaps I should give up? This is where the road splits. At this point, the losers will stop and surrender. The winners will continue to advance and win. But why do so many people give up? How do the winners keep winning? This is where mental toughness comes into play. This article will explain why successful people win and how they use their minds to overcome obstacles. In other words, how do they fortify their mental fortitude? What is mental toughness? Mental toughness is the psychological ability that allows people to cope better than most with the many demands that life places on them. They develop the ability to remain focused, confident, determined, and in control under pressure more consistently and better than most people. It's not that these people are superhuman, rather, they've developed the ability to recognize the difficulties of the situations they find themselves in while still moving forward regardless of how bad things get. If you're reading this, I'm assuming you have goals and dreams that you're determined to achieve. As a result, you understand that having a high level of self-discipline as a lifestyle is non-negotiable in order to achieve big goals. But, in addition to self-discipline, we need mental toughness. But you can't just tell someone, build mental toughness. You need methods that will help you lay a solid foundation and get you moving in the right direction with momentum. Over the years, I've studied high-level achievers in sports and elite military units to identify the key methods that enable them to overcome and achieve on a consistent high level. Today, I'm going to share 3 effective ways to begin developing mental toughness. They are as follows. 1. Stop negotiating with yourself. The first step in developing mental resilience is to stop bargaining with yourself. We are all creatures of habit. The issue with mental habits is that we don't always realize we have them. They are certain thought patterns that we unconsciously repeat. For example, every time you consider exercising, you find a reason why you should put it off. Let's do it tomorrow, you tell yourself. In other words, you begin bargaining with yourself. Every human being's mind is divided into 2 parts. Consider them the good guy and the bad guy. Or, to put it more scientifically, the old and new parts of the human brain are constantly at odds with each other. The ancient part of the human brain, referred to as the reptilian brain, and the newer part of your brain, referred to as the logical brain, have opposing agendas. The logical brain wants you to succeed. But every time the logical brain wants to act, the old brain intervenes and begins bargaining for something more comfortable. The key here is to put an immediate halt to the negotiations. Don't even allow for debate. Stop this bad guy in his tracks as soon as he approaches to negotiate. This works because as soon as you realize what is going on, you can cut it off and move on. Most people make the mistake of believing that the bad guy is a legitimate voice making a legitimate argument. Now that you know what is going on, you can recognize it and put a stop to it. There is no room for negotiation, simply move on and begin executing your plan. 2. Use the David Goggins cookie jar method. Navy SEAL David Goggins is one of the men I most admire in the world. Goggins rose to fame after the publication of his book, Can't Hurt Me. David Goggins is widely considered to be the toughest man on the planet, but this was not always the case. He was an overweight, mediocre underachiever who transformed himself into one of the world's most elite athletes. His cookie jar method was one of the most important lessons I learned from him. Goggins frequently discusses the cookie jar method and how he employs it. The cookie jar is essentially a virtual cookie jar that he enters when his back is to the wall. The cookie jar is filled with notes from various events in his life. Every note contains a reminiscence from the past. These are events that happened to him and that he was able to overcome. Even though he was able to overcome many of these events, they were all painful. So, whenever he feels like giving up, he opens the cookie jar and reads one of the notes. Remember when no one believed in you, but you still lost all the weight and went on to join the Navy SEALs, for example. The key to this method is to use past pain and pleasure experiences to motivate you to overcome whatever is in front of you. When used correctly, the mind is extremely powerful. This method enables us to overcome mental obstacles by using our brain's pain and pleasure centers. Make a mental cookie jar. It doesn't have to be anything big, but find something to remind you of what you're capable of doing when obstacles appear in your path. Use your past pain or pleasure as fuel to propel you forward and win. 3. Use the Special Operations Mind Control Method. Another technique I learned from the elite special operations community is to reduce the size of the mountain in front of you. To comprehend this method, you must first comprehend the context of special operations units. When you think of the Navy SEALs, 75th Ranger Regiment, Green Berets, or Marine Raiders, you are thinking of some of the most difficult training in the world. It is not only difficult, but it also takes a long time to complete. Depending on the unit, it may take up to 2 years to complete all training. A mental mountain awaits those who are brave enough to join. This is why so many people quit. 80% of SEAL candidates drop out. Many of them face mental challenges early in their training. For example, Navy SEAL Hell Week lasts 5 days and requires only 2 hours of sleep per day. Many people quit on the first day of a Hell Week because they have a mental wake-up call when they tell themselves, "This is only day 1, and I already feel like I can't go on. How am I going to get through the next 5 days? How am I going to get through the next 5 months?" This is an example of a mental barrier that causes most men to give up. These mental blocks, however, are not limited to the military. Maybe you started a business and realized after 5 months that things are a lot harder than you expected, so you tell yourself, "I don't know if I can do this for another year." So you gave up. So, how do we get past these mental roadblocks? How do we scale these mental peaks? Let us return to the Special Operations Units and their training to answer this question. We discuss the mental mountains that stand in their way and how they can overcome them. So, I recently listened to several Navy SEALs and Green Berets discuss how they overcome these mental mountains on a podcast. What they do is simple: they refuse to focus on the mountain in front of them. They break it down into manageable chunks. The Navy SEAL on the podcast stated that when he was going through Hell Week, he would frequently consider quitting, but every time, he would tell himself something like this: "Now that the sun is rising, I'm going to make it to lunch, and if I want to quit, I can do so at lunch." And then he'd get to lunch, and then he'd tell himself the following: "Okay, I'm ready to give up, but I'm going to stick it out until dinner and see how I feel then." Then, when he got to dinner, he'd tell himself he'd make it until breakfast. He'd keep doing it until the end of the week. He would continue to set small, attainable goals for himself in order to trick his mind into keeping moving forward. The key lesson is to not become overwhelmed by the lofty goals you set for yourself. You must train your mind to keep your big vision for yourself in the background while keeping your small, attainable goals in front of you. Don't become obsessed with the monumental task ahead of you. Simply concentrate on your small goals and begin implementing them one by one. That is how you triumph. Final thoughts. Most people who achieve great things are not born with superpowers. They've just learned how to use their minds so effectively that it's difficult for them to fail. Mental toughness is achieved by using tried-and-true methods to condition your mind to move in the desired direction. Does this imply that achieving your objectives will be simple? No, but if you do the work and use these methods consistently, you will condition your mind to never give up and to always be moving forward. You will put yourself in a position where you can consistently achieve your objectives and win. Thank you for watching.